We are now 280 days away from the midterms. It has been 2 long and emotional days since ICU nurse Alex Preddy was shot and killed by federal immigration agents. Another vigil was held in his honor in Minnesota tonight. As we begin to see the power behind we the people, the outrage over that shooting has forced the Trump team to dial back the rhetoric and possibly the action. President Trump spoke to both Governor Tim Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey earlier today. According to Frey, Trump said he will pull some federal agents out of the state as early as tomorrow. On social media, the president called the phone calls, quote, very good. That is a massive change from his relentless attacks on these 2 men over the last few weeks. Another change, Trump says he is sending border czar Tom Homan to Minnesota, and he is set to meet with Mayor Frey tomorrow. Meanwhile, Border Patrol Commander Greg Bovino, the guy who has been on the scene all over the media, is expected to be removed from Minnesota as early as tomorrow, according to 2 officials briefed on the matter. A separate source told MS Now that he is not just being taken out of Minnesota, he is being removed from his role as Border Patrol Commander at large. DHS is denying that report, saying he has not been relieved from his duties. Yesterday, Bovino was on TV. They put him out facing the public, said that the victims in the situation were the federal agents, the very agents who shot and killed Alex Preddy. And we have heard a very different tone today from White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. Watch this.
Secretary Noem said Alex Preddy committed an act of domestic terrorism. Stephen Miller labeled Preddy a domestic terrorist. Does the president agree with them?
Look, as I've said, I have not heard the president characterize Mr. Preddy in that way.
Will Stephen Miller be apologizing to the family of Alex Preddy for calling him, quote, an assassin who tried to murder federal agents, despite the fact that, as you say, this is still under investigation?
Look, again, this incident remains under investigation, and nobody here at the White House, including the President of the United States, wants to see Americans hurt or killed and losing their lives in American streets.
And the legal battles in Minnesota continue to ramp up. Today, a judge heard arguments in the state's lawsuit to force ICE to leave. She has not issued a ruling yet. But I just want to level set for a moment. I want to think again about why the administration is committing this massive surge of agents into the state of Minnesota in the first place. Because this state does not have a surge or a huge population of undocumented immigrants. According to a Pew estimate, in 2023, Minnesota has about 130,000 undocumented immigrants. They make up about 2.2% of the state's population. But let's compare that. I don't know, compare it to Texas, which has over 2 million undocumented immigrants. There they make up 6.6% of the population. Of course, there's another key difference between the two. Minnesota voted against Donald Trump 3 times, and Texas voted for Donald Trump 3 times. Is that a coincidence? You can decide. All right, let's get smarter with the help of our leadoff panel this evening. Akayla Gardner joins us, MS Now White House correspondent, Susan Glasser, staff writer for The New Yorker, and Barb McQuaid, a veteran federal prosecutor and former U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan. Akayla, take all of this together. Just how big of a change is this from the White House, even in the last 24 hours, right? I did a television broadcast last night, and we were looking at soundbite after soundbite of Greg Bovino, the most senior person they put out on national TV to talk about the situation. When he was done talking on TV, he was all over social media, and now, poof, he's gone.
Stephanie, it has been a remarkable change of tone in the last 24 hours from the president on down, starting with the fact that MS Now has confirmed that Greg Bovino will be or should be leaving as soon as tomorrow, along with some of the approximately 3,000 DHS agents that are in Minneapolis right now. President Trump also spoke with Governor Walz today. This is the first time he has done that since we've seen the escalation and protests, starting with the killing of Renee Good. He's described his conversation as positive, said that him and Walz are even on the same wavelength, which is just really remarkable to hear, given the fact that they have consistently attacked both Walz and Mayor Frey, who the president also spoke with today. But I think the most notable shift is how the White House is talking about the facts and the circumstances around this shooting. They said they want to see this investigation play out, but you had DHS Secretary saying that Alex Preddy was engaging in domestic terrorism. You had White House advisor Stephen Miller saying that he was a, quote, would-be assassin. And President Trump even fed into some of these narratives that he was an agitator, posting on Truth Social on Saturday a photo of his gun and saying, what is this about? Suggesting, that it was a loaded gun with full magazines. But even before the killing of Renee Good, we have seen in polling that Americans are increasingly uncomfortable with immigration enforcement. Yes, they are happy with the fact that the border is, quote unquote, closed, that they want to see, violent criminals deported, but they are increasingly seeing the images that we've reported on our network so much of people being deported in their front yards, people being confronted in school parking lots. And the White House is certainly starting to see that. And it feels that the political acknowledgement of what is happening has started to catch up with them today. And the fact that we could be looking at another government funding shutdown yet again at the end of this week. So they are starting to take into account the political ramifications of all the images that we're seeing when it comes to immigration enforcement.
Susan, you wrote a book on him. Donald Trump clearly understands political shifts. He absolutely understands vibe shifts. And we're seeing that in the last 24 hours. But if Donald Trump were to shift, right? He went from being hugely popular on immigration and then underwater. What does that do to the actual true believers, the zealots in the administration, the Stephen Millers, the Kristi Noems?
Yeah, look, I mean, you're right that this is not the first time that Donald Trump has faced enormous blowback from the American public for doing something extremely unpopular. Think back to the family separation policy that he promoted in his first term in office. When there was an enormous public outcry, Donald Trump backed away from that. And yet our reporting showed that he almost immediately regretting having done so and was repeatedly asking his advisors after having said, we're done with family separations, when they could restart it, when they could go back to this policy. And I think that's really a template that we're likely to see here. It's fascinating to me to watch the White House cut loose Bovino to, put stories out there that, well, maybe there'll be other changes at DHS. Oh, he had a good phone call today. This is Donald Trump's immigration crackdown, not Greg Bovino's immigration crackdown. And I think it's very important just to be clear about that. It was Donald Trump who put a post on social media saying that Minnesota's day of reckoning and retribution was coming. It was Donald Trump who ordered his Justice Department to initiate criminal investigations of the mayor of Minneapolis and the governor of Minnesota for the crime of incitement when they're giving press conferences saying, please, people, be peaceful. We must protest this and be peaceful. I would also point out that it's not an issue of immigration enforcement that has caused so many of the good people of Minneapolis to rise up against Donald Trump and what's happening in their city. They have gone after the basic rights of American citizens to protest. And I'm just haunted, as I'm sure you are, Steph, by the horrible video of Alex Preddy's last moments. Remember that he was going to the defense of a woman who was having the crap beat out of her by one of these goons. This wasn't immigration enforcement. This was a masked federal agent attacking a woman who was exercising her First Amendment rights. And so it's a perversion and really an insult to people to call it immigration enforcement that's being protested in any way, when what they're protesting is the lawless riot, essentially, of masked federal agents that have been unleashed by Donald Trump on the city of Minneapolis.
Okay, let's stay on Susan's point. Yes, maybe Bovino leaves tomorrow, maybe some agents leave tomorrow, but it doesn't mean the strategy is changing. They're certainly not pulling everyone out. And think about what Susan just laid out. the president's position, how he's gone after the mayor and the governor and the state. He's been on a mission. So where does this thing really go from here? Beyond dealing with uncomfortable PR that they're facing right now, do we know of any actual strategy change?
I don't know that there's any actual strategy change. The president and the White House definitely still wants to pursue immigration enforcement. But what the president told Governor Walz today, according to Walz, is he said, quote, "We're going to do things differently." Exactly what that looks like still remains to be seen. But we are seeing this huge political shift in this moment. And Walz has said that he has continued to be in touch with Chief of Staff Susie Wiles in recent days. So it seems that the president started to believe some of what Walz has described as them cooperating with federal enforcement, which Walz sort of seemed to be a surprise to the president today. But the president and the White House has continued to talk about Minnesota in this frame of also bringing up the allegations of fraud involving childcare payments. So they have very much tried to bring these two issues, two very separate issues, into one and described it all as a way to enforce the law and order in Minnesota and Minneapolis. So from the White House's perspective, this is an all-out effort to enforce the law when it comes to Minnesota.